Trifecta? You betcha. Okay, folks. Well, gonna make it three in a row here. The third in a row music documentary. And with this one, I am gonna go with 2005, same as the Larry Wildman Fisher doc. 2005's The Devil and Daniel Johnston. And let me tell you, this one affected me in a big way. I don't know, but then again, Daniel Johnston is an artist who affected me in a big way. I remember my bestie handed me a cassette dub of Hi, How Are You and Yip Jump music back around 1997, 1998, somewhere in there. And it's one of those things where you really kind of. I had heard one piece of music by him up to that point, and sitting around listening to his stuff just kind of fried my brain. 1 minute I'm just kind of like, wow, what the hell? You know, this guy just banging on this toy chord organ and yodeling out his songs for everybody to hear, and then you listen. It's kind of like, wait, there's some fucking depth to this. There's some talent to this. And between the chord organ and the out-of-tune piano, and then on like Desperate Man Blues, which is one of my favorites, he's sitting there just singing to this like old schmaltzy record, and just the first word in Outsider music, and it's kind of like in much the same way as Larry Fisher. But and just like the more you listen to it, it's just kind of like, okay, at first it's kind of like, this is so haphazard and crazy and amateurish and weirdly thrown together. You're kind of like enthralled, but at the same time, it's kind of like, how did you do this? Why did you do this? And then after a few listens, you're just kind of like bawling on the floor. And, needless to say, I became a huge fan. So in the, I had something of a resurgence. I think it coincided with this film. They put out a soundtrack, or they put out it wasn't really a soundtrack. They put out a collaboration. It was actually right along 2004, 2005, somewhere around there. They put out this big compilation of songs, and they'd have his version side by side with another artist's cover of the song, and it ran the gamut. A lot of the time Daniel's stuff was better than the kind of more polished professional like alt rock bands and whatnot. Some of the time the band's versions were actually pretty good, but regardless of that, you definitely got a flavor of him and his songwriting. And just, if you're riveted by this guy, fascinated by this guy, interested in his struggles, well, yeah, there's a whole lot of that for you. And his music and everything else, and a good chunk of, what really racked him up in his life. And you'll get all the good and all the bad. He was struggled with bipolar disorder. Possibly some other things. I don't know. But, I'm not a psychiatrist. I have no idea. But just, seeing various points where he kind of strikes out on his own in Austin and wherever else, and has different associations with different artists, and then things end up kind of blowing up between him and these other artists. And he falls into just severe paranoid delusions, and becomes very self-destructive, and and it's tragic because by the end he's just living back at home with his family, and probably not gonna. I'm not gonna say a whole lot more about that because just I don't know. Daniel is no longer with us, and of course can't come up and speak for himself, and you hate seeing it, but at the same time, it paints in a lot of ways kind of a sympathetic portrait of Daniel, and in a lot of ways, kind of like the way people who sought to kind of patronize him and kind of give him more of a platform sometimes got a little more than they bargained for. I think Heather and I watched that one afternoon, or afternoon/evening. We wound up catching a little bit of it later on, and it was just one of those things where we're flipping through some of the extras on the DVD, and just I wound up bawling my eyes out just watching the extras, and so it doesn't get the resounding "stay the hell away from it" that Born to Lose got. It also doesn't get the buyer beware of the Larry Wildman Fisher doc, but it's intense. It's well worth looking at. It's actually a good look at the man and his music and his process and his struggles. But suffice to say, it's not an easy watch, but I think it's actually still well worth checking out.